Hi, welcome to the Air Manager API tutorial video series. In this video we're going to be looking at images. Here we are again on the API page of the wiki. We'll find images in the list here. I think it should be up near the top somewhere. There we go. So, images, fairly straightforward. You have to add an image and give it an ID, as we've seen in some of the previous videos. We'll explain what all of the arguments are for that function. There's an image add full screen, fairly self-explanatory. Only one argument, literally just the file name, and it gives you the image in full screen. I'll be demonstrating that. Really easy. Rotating an image, we'll be talking about rotating image and some of the other functions to shift the rotate point. You'll see when we delve into rotate. Remove is not a function, as you can see here. It's going to be coming available in Air Manager and AirPlayer 3.5, so that's not something that we're going to touch on in this video, but it's reasonably straightforward in terms of it will just remove an image that you've already previously added just by giving it the image ID that you create as part of that add. So after adding it, you can free up some memory by removing the image. And then typically the node functions for images and text and the like that we've already covered in a previous video. So move, visible, opacity, and viewport rect. So we're not going to be talking about them. We will use viewport rect in one of the examples when we get onto the running text after the running images, after we cover the basic images. Just to show how the viewport rect can be used with running images. It's quite pertinent to the use of that, so we'll just touch on that very briefly. So then just jumping down to this second table here, these are all the running image functions. So you have the ability to add a running image vertically, horizontally, or in a circular manner. All of these are essentially the same, other than the circular one, of course, needs the additional parameter of radius, so you can define how big that circle is going to be. Then a function to help you manipulate those running text items that you've just created here with this running image ID, or the ID that you choose to create for it. You use that in this function, and you can adjust this position thing to see how that does. So I'll be demonstrating how to use that. And then again, the node functions for running text that we've already spoken about there. We're not going to be talking about these other than the brief mention of what the viewport rect's use is with the running text. So let's delve straight in. You can see I've put a few bits of code in here just to talk about the images first of all, and then I've got a little bit further down here so we can jump onto the running text. So this should be really quick and straightforward. It's so simple to use. It's probably one of the most basic functions within Air Manager. Adding in images and using, say, the visibility to show and hide one is a fundamental and an important feature within Air Manager. So again, getting in the habit of creating the ID as we've touched on in previous videos. So I've just called it image ID here, and then the image add statement here. You choose the file name of the image that you want from your resources folder for that particular instrument, and then the X and Y position that the top left hand corner of that image will start at, and then the size of that image. So it's important to say with the images that no matter what size your image is going to be, this will override your image, so it will make it exactly your width and your height here. So it will make it 100 by 100. So if your aspect ratio is not 1:1, i.e. the same pixel width and the same pixel height, then it will look distorted. So if you want to keep it your images the exact size they are, then use the width and height from your exact image in here, or a ratio of what they are, so you keep the aspect ratio between the width and height so you don't get a distorted image. So let's go ahead and run that. I've just used the same switch pin PNG file that we've used in previous tutorials, and there you can see it's 50 pixels in from the left. Imagine a box around this here. It's actually transparent in the corners here, but it would be around about there. So 50 pixels in from the left and 50 pixels down from the top, which is obviously the top left-hand corner of the image, and then an image of 100 by 100 pixels. So this overall instrument that I've been using for this tutorial so far is only 200 by 200 pixels. So you can see 100 is around, so 50 is there, and then another 100 is about 150 would take you to there, and then another 50 would take you to the edge of the instrument. So I've just sort of centered the image in the middle of the instrument there. So that's how to position an image and size an image when you want to add it. So we'll comment that out for the moment then, and we'll uncomment the next one, what I've got here, which is image add full screen. Fairly self-explanatory. It just adds the image full screen, so whatever the size of your instrument is, it will add that. And again, the same applies here in terms of distortion. If your instrument is a perfect square and your image isn't a perfect square, then it's going to look a little distorted because it's going to stretch it to fill the whole instrument. So you don't need to give it any X and Y, because obviously the X and Y will be 0, 0, and you don't have to give it any width and height, because the width and height will be the width and height of the instrument. So you just tell it which image you want to use, and it will fill the instrument up with that image. So let's do that very quickly. There you go. There's the switch in its full screen glory, although a little distorted because it's actually not that big an image. That's why it's looking a little distorted. So let's take the full screen off again and go back to the standard image that we've got there, and then we're going to look at rotate. So rotating an image, if we again give it the image ID, and then we just put this number in here is a degrees number. Now by default you can see I've got two rotates here, which I'm going to explain this bottom one in a moment, but the rotate here is the default basic one that you'd use in most cases, so you don't have to use these additional 3 arguments on the end here. So the image ID and literally the number of degrees that you want to rotate the image for. Now it takes the rotation point as the center of the image, so however big your image is, it will work out where the center is, and it will rotate the number of degrees around that point. So you can see this image here's kind of got a reference little marker here on the switch here, so 45, 90 is around there, so 45 is going to be up here, maybe just slightly right of the 12 o'clock position there of that switch. So we should see a rotation around this central point. So you can see, like in this particular instance, how you could use this rotate function to do exactly what we've just done here and rotate the switch. So every time you you wanted a switch of the position of the switch to rotate, or an image of the switch to rotate, you could just rotate this round, and this little white marker would just rotate round to the different bits. So you can kind of animate the movement of this switch knob here to show the different positions. So there you go. It's obviously shifted round, and we can make that another number. We could make that 90 if we wanted to, and then it would shift round a little bit further. Bearing in mind that's not 90 from the last position, that's another 45 from where we just were, but it's 90 from this original declaration up here, which was over here, so that's 90 degrees from that position. So that's rotate. Now let's comment that one out. We'll just go back to our original one, back in that position, and now the following rotate, it's going to do a similar thing. We'll use the image ID again, and we're going to say we want to rotate it 45 degrees. But now we have, and let's go back, just go back to the API page very quickly, just to look at this rotate function. You can see we've got these optional arguments here called anchor X, Y, and Z. The Z you don't have to worry about too much because you know, we're not talking about 3D here. But the X and Y are important in terms of you can change the rotation point of your image. So if we go back to our code window here, you can see I've put some numbers in here. The Z is just 0, but the X I've made 150 and the Y I've made 150. So let's just think about what that means for a minute. We've already said that this instrument is 200 pixels wide by 200 pixels high. So if I say I want to come in 150 pixels, I'm coming in this far, to roughly the far end of the switch knob here, and then another 150 pixels down from the top. So again, down to this corner. So I've chosen this 150 by 150 just because basically now it shifts the rotation point from the center here to this bottom right hand corner of this image. And so what we'll see, you can kind of imagine it as if you were to put a pin in a piece of paper and then rotate that piece of paper around that pin location. If you stuck a pin for a piece of paper on a desk and then rotated that piece of paper around that pin location with a picture on it, and then it would essentially be your image rotating around this point here. So when we rotate 45 degrees, you can see now it's over here because it's rotated kind of round over on that thing. That's a little difficult to get your head round in terms of seeing the position there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the image here for another one that I've got. I've very quickly created this image. So we've turned the rotates off now for the moment, just so you can see. Okay, so it's just a very crude square here, but I've put sort of 4 different colours here so you can get an idea of when this thing rotates, you'll see where each of the colours are. Okay, so that's our default image. When we use the rotate now with this rotation point, don't forget I've set the rotation point now to be here and not the centre, which is the default. Think of a pin in that location. Remember, it's around about here. Now you can see how it's rotated from this pivot point, if you like. If you were to draw a straight line along here and measure that angle there, that would be your 45 degrees. So essentially from that point there, it's twisted in a clockwise direction 45 degrees. So you can see how with a bit of careful working out of where you want that pivot point to be, you can rotate an image not necessarily around its center, but about some other point within the instrument dimensions that you might want to rotate that that image by. Like for instance, the center of here. If you had an image here, you could rotate it around this point, and you could maybe make it go up and down in an arc around that point, or you know, move it up here for a sort of an arc to swing up. Depends on what your image is, but you can have a play around with that X, Y and Z feature. And where this rotate also comes in useful is when you're using it with text, which we'll get onto in another video. In terms of shifting the rotation point, it doesn't always have to be the default, which is the center. Okay, so that's the basic image functions. What we're going to look at now, we're just going to look at some running images. So what I'm going to do is start off by showing you, well, I'm going to show you another ad quickly, which is kind of related to images, but I'm using it for the purposes of showing the running images, just so it shows up a little better. But I've got an image here which is called black.png, and essentially it is just a 1 pixel by 1 pixel black square for filling. So I use a few of these different ones, different colors for different things. But if you want to say fill a whole instrument, a 200 by 200 pixel, you don't have to save a 200 by 200 pixel image, because I've said about these functions in terms of specifying the coordinates and the size, or the full screen function. It will just scale the thing up. So you can just use a very simple 1 pixel by 1 pixel image. This one's called black.png, and you say image add full screen, which is what I've got here, and then when we run the instrument, it will just make the whole instrument black. There we go. So that's from a 1 pixel by 1 pixel image, and it's just scaled up to to fill the instrument. Okay, so if we delve now into the running images, whoops. Okay, so the first one I've uncommented here is the running image add vertical function. So you tell it the name of the image as is normal. We've given it the ID already at the beginning, and then we're going to give it an X and a Y starting position, very similar to adding a normal image, but then this is where it varies a little bit. This number here is the number of iterations of this image that you want to see in this running image. So here we're going to say 3, so we'll have three of those please in the running image vertical, and then here these are the dimensions, the width and the height of the image that you want it to be. So in this case I'm saying I only want it to be 9 pixels wide by 43 pixels high. I'd like 3 of them, and I want to start at a position of 90 and I want to come down about 50. So I want to start about here. It's only 9 pixels by 43 high, but I want 3 of them. So let's see what that looks like. So there you go. This particular image is I've called scale.png. It's just a scale, but you can see it's made up. It's using 3 of these images. This scale image is only literally however big, and so it's appending 1, 2, 3 like that on the end of itself, just for the purposes of showing how that is. Now what will make it a little bit clearer is if in fact just for the purposes of comparing, let's just change that scale back to the switch. So just so you can see. So there you go. There's the 3 switches. So that's our 3 there. If we change that number to I don't know, 8. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 8 one's just sort of going off the end of the instrument there because we're starting at 50, but we could bring that up a bit if we wanted to. So you can see, however, whatever that number is, that's how many of the images it's got there. So if we just change that one back to okay. So for the moment, so there we go, we're back to what we had, and now what we're going to do is just show you the other ones quickly. So this one is the horizontal one. So again, very simple. This time I'm using the switch one just so you can see it for clearly. And I'm saying I want 5 of them. There's my switch or my knob dimensions, and I want to come in 10 pixels from the left and 90 pixels down. So it's going to start around about sort of here somewhere, and it's going to put let's say 10. So it'll sort of span across here somewhere, about 10 of them. There you go. There's your 10 knobs. Probably too many there. Let's say 8. There we go. And then the next one is almost identical again. This time it's circular. Now the circular one has 1 extra argument on the end. So again, you've got your X and your Y. You've got the number of elements that you want. You've got the size of the actual individual image there, 20 by 20 pixels, and then this one here is the radius of the circle. So this is going to draw a circle, but you need to tell it how big you want that circle, so that's the radius in there. So let's run that. There you say. So now what it does is it evenly distributes and evenly spaces out these images around the 360 degrees of a circle. So you see we've selected 5 there, so it's got 5 equal segments there of the images. If we say, for instance, want to do say a clock with 12 positions, we'd end up with a sort of 12 position, more traditional clock face there, and you can change that number to be whatever you want. Oh, way too many. Probably didn't like that too much. Let's try 30. There we go. So you get the idea anyway. That's running image add circular. So now then, the last little thing, or one of the last little things I'd like to show is the next. Let's just go back to the API page here. So we've spoke about adding the individual running images, which is okay if you just want a lot of static images, but there's also the ability to move those images around, and you do that with this running image move caret function. So let's have a little look at that now, and then I'll just very briefly at the end talk about the viewport rect in terms of why it's useful when you're doing this this caret move with the running image add feature. Right. So we'll bring out so this is one of the main reasons why I went for the black background, so it just makes this a little bit easier to see. So there's our running image add vertical that we originally showed with a scale on it, and it's got 3 of those scales, one after the other here, added in sequence. So what I've got here now is I've got a little timer that's going to basically run, and this is where I've got my running image move caret function, and you give it the running image ID again, so running image ID, which is the one that we've got up here, and then you give it a positional number to go on the end here. So I've give this a variable name, just called it var, and then just before that I'm gonna keep adding 0.02 to var every time this timer loop is run, if you like, or every time it goes. So that's every 20 milliseconds, you can see here. So it starts immediately straight away at 0, and then every 20 milliseconds it's going to add 0.02 to this variable, and so this variable is going to continually increase, and you can see how by varying the this positional argument of the running image move caret and referencing it back to an image ID, that you can actually make this move. So let's run that now, and you'll see the effect that has. Well, there you go. There's the scale moving, and then it's sort of adding another one on the end. So it's starting to think. So you can see that if you were to take say a snapshot window of that and not have to look at these bumpy bits at the end that you don't have to look at, you'd actually end up with a smooth running scale. I know it's probably a little bit difficult to visualize or see that now, but that's how the scales, the vertical scales or the horizontal ones, if you had a horizontal image in Instruments, is done with this running image and in fact the running text as well. You can add text against these tick marks along the side to get that running as well, which we'll look at in a later tutorial. So just to touch very briefly then on what I just said there in terms of the, making that look a lot more smooth in terms of not having to see this bit where it cuts off and it adds on at the end there, is that's where the viewport rect come in. So the viewport rect, which we've already covered in a previous tutorial, enables you to look at a small section as if you're looking through a rectangular window. You don't see anything outside of that rectangular window. So if we define a rectangular window around the center section of this scale, which is what I've got in here, you'll see the effect that that then gives by chopping off these bits, these unwanted bits at the start and the beginning. Sorry, the start and the end, and you just left with the scrolling section in the middle. So let's go ahead and show you that. So there you go. Now we've got our viewport rect around here. We've chopped off that nasty bit there, and that chopped off that nasty bit there, and now we only see the center section, and you can see the effect that it gives. Essentially, it's just a scrolling scale, either going up or down in, say, airspeed or altitude, that you could use that for. And add the numbers in as well, and they will scroll equally as well, and you can tie that into a data ref or var coming back from the sim, and you can make this scale move up or down corresponding to the data coming back out of the sim. So there you have it. That is all of the image functions. Fairly straightforward, most of them. Takes a little bit of getting your head around some of these running image functions, particularly the caret move one, but have a little play around with them, and you'll see how useful they are. That concludes this video. Please join me again for another one very soon. Thanks. Bye.